And I just thought this was the most beautiful thing. And actually, on the other side, it had these words written and these numbers which didn't make any sense and stuff like that, just in black pen. And I thought that was a fucking incredible bit of art, you know. But it was until I picked it up, it remained not art, or until I took a photo, it was a fridge top.
And it's the photo that becomes a piece of art.
Exactly. Rather than a piece of art. If you put that on the wall, or if you, I mean, it's something that I object to anyway, because I see everything as art. But I mean, you know, to go through a process is.
And the fridge to me would remain non-art. The fridge actually on the street corner, slashed into bits, would remain.
But that's in situ. So in situ, it would remain not art. But when you took it out of its context into an installation, then it would be.
In that respect, coming back to the suicide box, and if something's documented, it becomes art. In that context, would the jumpers themselves be?
Would it?
Would they be performance artists, if you like?
The thing about that, we were talking about that earlier, about removing things from their context, and they thought that makes them sort of art because they recognise. But actually, for me, if I saw that fridge in an alleyway or a corner, I would consider that art in situ, not just removed, because I run a theatre company that's site specific, and we like to work in derelict spaces. So we look for spaces like that as an environment to make a piece of work. And
all of my work also is in situ, and that is where it stays for me. Like the process that I go through, it's a very individual, as you say, that for you is that bit of art, you know. For someone else it may not be, so maybe it is completely subjective anyway, but maybe it's a process that you go through inside yourself, or maybe it's just the way that you've been raised, or you know, the way you've been taught to look at something.
We were discussing earlier on whether something has to be experienced socially in order to be perceived as art. And I addressed the question as if I were to make something alone inside my house or whatever and never show it to anyone. And you know, although I might be giving, you know, putting a lot of creative energy into this, whatever it was, does it have to actually be granted a social representation?
It's like stealth art. I mean, when people realise it's supposed to be happening, there's a lot of performance work that goes on. You don't know if it's supposed to be a performance or not. And then even someone tells you, oh, by the way, did you realise? But I mean, you could say that, I mean, even, I don't know about how Banksy started, but even when you think about it, no one would notice any of his spray paint templates. You know, his work might never be considered art if no one had ever noticed them. Or taken.
Well, I think it was always considered anti-art, and that's why he was doing it. It was because it was in situ, and because it was against the grain of normal society, and against the grain of people who considered art to be in galleries, you know. And that was why it was.
His work is selling for how much money now?
Exactly.
People are ripping bits of plywood off the wall that
or people are destroying it.
Destroying it. Some people painting over it.
And not realising
I
what to do.
wonder if it's like going back to the whole thing of like the artist deciding. I did a piece the other day where it was based on the idea of the theatre, and we were all artists looking at theatre as a sort of idea space. And my piece was to bring everything backstage onto the stage. So I did a piece where I put on all my makeup, I prepared for the stage, off stage, but it was this private act that I was going to do anyway, whether I was on stage or off stage. But the very fact that I decided to put it on stage made it art, I suppose. But I wonder if we think of like artistic decisions, does everything that artists do, is that art? Is getting up in the morning, is wearing this outfit, is having this breakfast, is that art?
But that's interesting, because I remember Mishkin did a show where, I can't remember, it was 1894 I think it was called, where the audience came in whilst the artist was, the performers were still putting their makeup on, and the putting the makeup on and the costume was a crucial part of the performance. And that was what most of the performance was them getting ready, and then there was the performance afterwards which they stayed for. That was considered.
How did they distinguish between the getting ready performance and the performance after?
Well, they actually had dressing tables with mirrors and makeup set up on this part of the stage, but the actors sat there on an elevated area, and also it was in this huge barn, which Michigan does anyway, so they all walked into this big barn and they're wandering about, and you see them putting on their makeup and they're just chatting to each other, and they put their costumes on, and then after about 20 minutes they go on stage and they start. But that was deliberately part of the performance.
So that was a performance, so it was art. So if the audience wasn't there, and they were in the dressing rooms,
if there was no
that
audience,
the same thing.
That's a good thing.
But you haven't enhanced it as art.
Bukowski would say that was para theatre if there was no audience. That just means that it's an experience between performers who are sharing something, but if there's no one there to watch it,
but if there's no one there to decide that it is an experience.
If there's no one watching, you're all participating.
But if you're all participating, but as you say, just putting on your makeup, you're not doing it for a performance, you're not doing it for, you're just preparing for a show, then that's not art. And why is that?
Because there's no one watching it.
No, I don't think it is.
That's Bukowski's argument, not my argument.
Well, I think it's because you haven't decided that it is.
If they were to come in and film it and then put it on the internet for people to watch, I'd say that would become a piece of artwork. But just people sitting there putting their makeup on, doing it, like eating your breakfast, you wouldn't consider a piece of art until someone sat and watched you doing it or filmed it and put it out there for
people to watch. Well, that's the process, but that's kind of like we've talked about the process, but then arrived at a conclusion that is, maybe it's yourself denouncing it is, it's yourself deciding that it's art in what you do or in what you perceive, you know.
But that's again the argument about it being social. It's like if you decide it's a piece of art in your home that only you are going to enjoy, then it might be a piece of art to you.
Well, then it is.
But is it a piece of art to you? It doesn't need to be social.
That's an idea I was wondering, but I
don't think there's an answer to it. It's more of an opinion.
And also I was wondering if something needs to actually be granted a physical manifestation. I mean, if I think of the image in my head.
Oh wow! I'll have to take a few drugs to understand that one.
Again, there's an argument for anything, and there's a counter-argument for anything.
But is that not the answer then, in that case, that everything is entirely subjective?
Again, it's not an opinion, I think.
Exactly.
Everything's an opinion. You know, things that are real and things you can touch and taste and feel and see, and then you can say everything else is just subjective. Really.
I would say Andrew's point about, you know, if everything and nothing is art, I think there is an important distinguishing point to stop us all from just going insane and thinking about it. I think there does have to be a physical manifestation of some trace of it, which is beyond, something very internal. So even though it's very subjective and very questionable, it still does require, I would say, it would still require that much of a distinction that it is an experience, whether it's live performance, which is very transitory and so on, or an object, or something two-dimensional on a canvas, or a photograph, which is, a piece of physical object in itself, but also a document.
So it has to exist in real time as opposed to...
I think so, yeah, and an experience as well, because the stuff I do with live art, it's like, in performing arts, it's like, you'll never have this again. It was all about being right here, right now.
I love that, yeah.
Coming back to that, I'm quite interested in performance art, and I read a lot about these legendary performance art events that have taken place, and they become almost like legends in a way, some of these performance artists and what they've done, and the actual idea that these performances have left behind them. These events happened, many years before I was born in most cases.
And they were undocumented some of the time as well.
So the 70s, 60s,
but they still exist and are perceived as art, even though they were a temporary event, people are still acknowledging them as art, And in that case, it is entirely a mental process that is creating the art, I think.
But a lot of that stuff is going to really despised at the time. And now, because I've got an interest in dance as well, and some of the work going on in the United States in the 60s, at the time was sort of seen as people walking around doing everyday things was ridiculous, stupid, I can't believe we're wasting so much time. And now, 40 to 50 years on, we're looking at that as a monumental move away from traditional dance forms and even from modern dance, where you could look at the pedestrian movement and see that as a piece of choreography. And everyone else was just sort of saying, well, that's just people walking around. Other people were saying that the dance be.
Hello.